Thank you, Honourable Speaker, sir, and thank the Honourable Member for the question. Honourable Speaker, sir, the building and construction sector in Fiji is actually critical for the growth in Fiji and the rest of the world. So it's critical for the growth of any economy. And pre-COVID-19, Honourable Speaker, sir, Fiji's building construction sector was actually booming and employing thousands of Fijians. And as the August House has heard over this week, sir, despite the pandemic in 2020, we've actually still had 1,458 building permits that were issued, which means investor interest in Fiji still remains. Now, as the sector grows, Honourable Speaker, sir, with it grows the importance of high standards and high quality buildings that actually comply with standards. Now, the Ministry of Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport, through the Department of National Trade Measurements and Standards, is actually responsible for setting standards for all goods and services in Fiji, sir. We even have our bread checked by this particular department, sir. The department has actually developed relevant building material standards, which ensures that the building materials are actually fit for purpose and, more importantly, fit for our conditions. There are over 24 odd building-related standards adopted as Fijian specifications, and some of the building material standards that are in place are for materials such as roofing coils, cyclonic screws, and steel reinforcing materials such as deformed bars and welded mesh, etc. These mentioned materials are actually critical components of any building that's being built, whether it's a home or whether it's a multi-story building. Now, I wish to highlight, sir, that since Tropical Cyclone Winston, the Ministry is actually focused primarily on ways to ensure that the Fijian public and the private sector are fully aware of the current standards for building materials. And most importantly, we've actually worked hand in hand with stakeholders to look at how we can actually make buildings more resilient, and most importantly, sir, more resilient to Category 5 cyclones. One of the major causes of the destruction of buildings is actually non-compliance, Honourable Speaker, with the Fijian National Building Code. Now, in order to minimize this non-compliance issue, sir, with the FNBC, the Ministry, in collaboration with the World Bank Group, developed the guideline for improving building safety and resilience for new single-story houses and schools in rural areas throughout Fiji, sir. The Ministry and the World Bank Group worked with the relevant agencies, such as the Ministry of Itoke Affairs, provincial offices, Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Economy, Construction Industry Council, and Fiji Institute of Engineers, and Fiji Architects Association to develop this easy-to-use guidelines. Guidelines actually been translated into 3 vernacular languages and is available on the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Tourism Transport website, with the exception of the Hindi version, which is actually currently being finalized. Furthermore, Honourable Speaker, sir, the Building Standards Committee also, which was established in 2016 to specifically look at the realignment and modernization of standards to current international best practices. In this regard, the standards for roof sarking foils, steel coils, grading for steel coils and steel reinforcing materials were actually put in place. And now the Ministry is actually working on 2 more critical standards, so that's standards for wind load and plywood. Mr. Speaker, sir, as part of its responsibilities, the Department also monitors the standards and quality of building materials that are actually manufactured here in Fiji and imported into the Fijian market. And this is undertaken through market surveillance methodology and conformity assessment, third-party or independent accredited laboratory to demonstrate the compliance of product against standards. We don't let anything get through, sir, that doesn't actually comply with the standards. Market surveillance methodology includes pre-market and post-market surveillance, which actually incorporates testing and inspection of the building product before and after the product enters the Fijian market. This is a globally accepted good practice which enhances protection for all our consumers and builds the trust of investors. Honourable Speaker, sir, in addition, the Ministry also issues import permits for materials such as roofing coils and cyclonic screws, and over the past 3 years we've actually issued 80 import licenses for cyclonic screws and 605 licenses for roofing coils. We also work with other agencies, Honourable Speaker, sir, such as Fiji Revenue Customs Services, to monitor these products at the border or at the point of entry. So, in terms of compliance, the Ministry undertakes investigations of any complaints, also of possible violation of these respective standards under the Quality Control Act of 1992. And whilst monitoring and enforcement is important to maintain these standards, continued awareness and advocacy also is equally important. This is where we work actively with the public and private sectors to create awareness on these particular standards. I've highlighted the key initiatives that the DNTMS under the Ministry undertakes to ensure that the standards are updated and meet our ever-challenging market demands. And in case of building and material standards, the Department actually ensures thorough compliance, and so that we have buildings that are resilient to elements of nature and user-friendly for all Fijians. I hope that answers the question, sir.